Get involved with the show. Email radio@homesdale.net or call us on 0208 1234 098. Homesdale Radio. Voices for Palace Watch, faces for Crime Watch.
Hello, and thank you for... Oh, God, no, that was terrible. 1 minute. I was trying to sound like you for a minute there, Chris.
Can I just say, Mikey, make sure you keep all of the outtakes, so there's going to be lots. Yeah.
Flip's sake. Right. There's not going to be many, though.
Sorry, hang on a second. I should actually be near my microphone. I'm just trying to... Bear me a sec. There we go. I'm back now.
Hello, and thank you for tuning into this HOL Radio Transfer Special podcast. We're going to preview the January window and get all opinions from big figures in the Crystal Palace land. Talking of big figures, I'm joined by Chris Hambling. Hello, Chris.
Unacceptable, Alex. To this early on in our special podcast, I'm just gutted. What made you think that was a good idea?
That's a very good idea. Yeah. Is it strange being in the co-presenter seat as opposed to the host?
It is. You're going to have a lot of trouble controlling me. I might swear, I'm going to take the gel roll on. That's what I'm going to do today.
Well, let's see how it pans out, I guess. I want to kick off straight away by briefly reviewing the last window and the 25-man squad that was selected by Mr. Ian Holloway. When you think of players like Elliot Grandin and how he got on the squad, do you think Holloway started to panic buy?
I think when you talk about it's not just Holloway panic buying. I think we the whole club lined up a load of targets and we just went for everyone. Holloway did panic in a sense that he didn't know who was going to be available at what point in that window, and obviously it wasn't just a window. It was also leading up to it. We really struggled to get people in, and Grandin and Morange are examples of they're classic panic buys. They're people in positions that we wanted to fill that effectively have served absolutely no purpose. Obviously, Morange was sent back to France pretty quickly, and he wasn't treated the best, to be honest. No fault of his own, and to a point, not really the club's fault. It's just how things worked out. But Grandin's been a huge waste of time and money.
And you think about someone like Stephen Dobby, who didn't even get in that 25. You're telling me that Stephen Dobby's a worse player than Elliot Grandin? Dobby's played at this level, and I think he did very well, actually, in his first season with Swansea. So I was very surprised that he could get in above him. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, Dobby's an interesting one, isn't he? Because I always felt that the reason we bought him is because we said we would. He was a huge figure in getting us up. Chipped in with a couple of really good goals, just in important matches, and just contributed really well. And in pre-season, he looked really good. Looked one of our best players. But I think ultimately, Holloway didn't see him as a Premier League player, but we'd gone too far down the process with the agreement we had with Brighton to pull out of the deal. And it's another one where maybe if we hadn't got certain players in, there would have been a space for him. But it's a shame. But I think we would sort of go on to it in a sec, but I was to a point I can understand Dobby not being in the 25, but no, he's not worse than Grandin, no.
And one of our most influential players last year, Owen Garvin, who had 32 league games last season, didn't even get in the squad over someone like O'Keefe, who I believe is better, but played a lot less part last season. Is he not good enough for the Premier League, even though you see people like Grandin getting a spot over him?
Garvin's an interesting one, isn't he? We've talked about him a lot, and I think one of the things you've got to say about Owen Garvin is that while he contributed well at Championship level, he had his detractors then, and at Premiership level, you're just not going to know whether he's going to actually sink or swim. For me, I've always said I think he's just too slow. And I can understand him not being in the squad when you talk about central midfielders. But again, if you start looking at who was included in that squad, and I hate to say it, but obviously Paddy is one that was in there who was never going to play, and that was a bad call. And Grandin, and when you think that Owen Garvin's been out and not played any competitive football in that whole time, at the cost of those two, it just seems a really odd decision. And maybe he's not good enough, but I don't think we're ever going to get to see. So pretty much certain he'll be out of the club fairly soon.
Yeah, I think he's well up for leaving. And Neil Alexander, I think this was one of the strangest decisions that I actually saw. I don't know if it's an FA ruling or not, but We put 3 goalkeepers in the squad, and Holloway panicked because Price had picked up an injury, and he said, I wanted a backup goalie for that game. I didn't want to put a youngster on the bench. But that went against every ethos that Holloway spoke about when taking over. But surely there's another slot that you can put one of these players that had been left out in the squad that will be more influential this season than Neil Alexander as a third-choice goalkeeper.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, definitely, and it did seem a strange signing, and obviously we didn't want to rely on Ross Fitzsimmons for whatever reason, or any of the lads sort of backing him up in terms of Gregory and King. But I don't really know. I don't know what the rules are surrounding goalkeepers in terms of if you only pick 2 and both get injured, obviously you've got to dip into the youth. But I don't know why we went down the route we did. It does again. It smacks of panic, and it shows you perhaps that the pressure that Holloway was under, that we saw him eventually suffer with and leave the club for. I think it doesn't make a great deal of sense to pick that third keeper purely on the basis that he has experience. It's a hell of a, like you say, it's an extra player slot. It's a hell of a thing to pick someone in a 25 that you're never going to use. And, we picked 3.
And you alluded to Paddy McCarthy. No minutes played for the first team this season. When you think about that we let Peter Ramage go out on loan, I'm not saying he's good enough for the Premier League, but he's got a chance of playing if you put him in that 25 over someone like Paddy. Yeah,
and those early days were where we missed it, weren't they? Because that was where the sort of spirit broke down, and Ramage was a big part of that, I think. The thing for Paddy is and I'm a big fan of his, and I don't agree with this whole thing of people saying even if he was fit, he's not good enough again, and all that sort of stuff. I think, again, he's been out so long. It's April 2012 since he played for us. And he's been out so long that people have forgotten the good things he does and remembered the bad things, I think. And there's times that I think we really could have done with his leadership and ability in the centre of defence. But the bottom line is, we picked him. He wasn't fit when he was picked in the 25, and he's still not fit now. So you could say, with the benefit of hindsight, what a stupid decision it was. But I don't even think you needed hindsight. I just think it was a foolish decision. Until you're sure, when someone's been out that long, until you're absolutely sure that they're ready and they're back. And okay, he's had a few minutes in reserve games and seems to have disappeared again, but it was just too big a risk to take with it's a Premiership season. You can't take risks like that. You really can't.
And I think maybe it's harsh to blame Holloway for that one, but the doctors and the physios maybe should have looked at that and said, actually, Holloway, it's probably not the best idea to pick him. And then Kevin Phillips, who he's barely had a kick of football, did his legend status win him a contract and a place in that 25-man squad? He's better than Wilbraham, of course, but is that what won him a contract? That one penalty, that £120 million penalty?
I actually think. I think it's more. I think we're always going to offer him something because of that. I think we're always going to say to him, look, there's a place here if you want it. You might get a few minutes in the Premier League, that sort of a thing. But I think what it actually came down to is it's another one like Grandin and like Morange, where we were quite a way into that window and we just hadn't really added anything up front. And people were, I'm sure if you think about it, you remember the clamouring for defenders and strikers. Everyone was convinced we had enough in the midfield, but we didn't have enough up front and we didn't have enough at the back. And Phillips was signed relatively early on in that window, but I still consider him to be a signing in a position that we needed, purely on the fact that he was available. He to a point he does deserve it for what he gave us last season, and he was a fantastic signing. And in a very short space of time, like you say, he's got a degree of legend status there. But another one with hindsight, you just don't think it's the right decision.
Talking of Palace legends, we have Palace Radio Jerry Clark on the line. Good evening, Jerry.
Now there was a very overused tone, I would say, but it's very nice to be with you, Alex.
And just about the January window, talking about Tony Pulis, what sort of budget do you think he's going to have to play around with?
I don't think anybody has any idea on that, and certainly it's nothing that is ever going to be disclosed. I mean, the budget is going to be between the chairman and the manager.
But
I really have no idea, and we would all be guessing, to be fair, Alex.
There was a bit in the paper about Pulis playing for points and getting money out of that. You don't have any sort of idea on a number, any sort of what sort of money he's going to have?
I really don't. I mean, I suspect a lot is going to depend on the type of player that's available. I mean, if he really wants to get somebody in that's going to cost an awful lot of money, I have absolutely no doubt that the board will come up with the goods. But, you know, you're asking a very difficult question, to be fair, and I think they will spend as much as they need to spend to get the right players in. I think it's as simple as that. I mean, preferably, they'd rather not spend any money at all, I suspect. But to get quality players in, they will have to spend, unless, of course, they use the loan market. But even the loan market does cost, because clubs expect money up front, even if they're loaning you players. So it's a difficult thing to say, because I just simply don't think that you can put a figure on it.
Someone we haven't seen a lot of this season is Dwight Gale. Obviously, he came on and scored an amazing goal against Aston Villa. Is he the kind of player you think Tony Pulis might be looking to loan out to the lower leagues to see what he's really about?
I think personally there is absolutely no chance of Dwight Gale being loaned out to anybody. I don't think that you spend £4.5 million plus on a player and then consider loaning him out. I mean, quite frankly, the players that we are looking for, I suspect at the moment, is a central defender and a striker. And we want to add to the strike force. We simply don't want to send players out on loan that we've already got here that are strikers.
And obviously you alluded to us buying strikers there. Do you think there's any other positions that we could do with strengthening in your opinion, as opposed to Tony Pulis's?
Well, in my opinion, obviously we need to strengthen all over the park. But that's fairly unrealistic. I mean, you've only got a 25-man squad. And if you're going to get more than, say, 2 or 3 players in, and I think that is very unlikely, then you're going to need to let players go. And so you're really only going to be able to strengthen in a couple of positions, realistically. And those, for me, would be the priorities. I mean, I know we've got a bit of a problem at the moment with injuries in midfield, but, you know, those players will come back. I mean, I understand that KG and Stuart O'Keefe will be available very soon. Possibly KG will be playing in midweek. So, you know, those would be the 2 positions that I would want to see us strengthen.
Jerry, we're joined by Chris Hambling. I think he's got a quick question for you.
I have indeed. Alex forgot to mention that I was here, so I thought I'd lurk in the background for a while. Just picking up on what you were talking earlier, Jerry. Tony Pulis, I've really noticed that pretty much every press conference he has talked about those transfer targets. And whilst obviously you don't have any kind of idea of the budget, like none of us do, but do you think perhaps that's a sign just how much his focus is on bringing in that extra quality?
Well, clearly he wants to bring extra players in. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he's made that point ever since he took over as manager, that this would be a question of trying to get through until the January transfer window. At that point, he would then be able to strengthen. And the fact that the club are not in the bottom 3 at the moment means that they've got a far greater chance of attracting better players. Because, you know, if you're bottom of the table and you're cut adrift, players don't want to sign for you if they think you're going to be in the Championship next season. But, you know, the club have proved that they've every chance of staying up this season. And because of that, they will be able to get better players, in my opinion. They'll be able to attract better players.
Just to sort of follow up on that point, I noticed from some of your comments earlier on the BBS, giving people a quick update at the press conference, Pulis mentioned that he wanted to get things done early, and I got the impression you didn't think that was likely to be the case, and nor did he. But do you think there's any chance that we've got something lined up ready to go pretty quickly?
In all honesty, I don't. I mean, I know that he's got several players in mind, but whether he's going to be able to get them over the line on the 1st of January, I suspect that's simply not going to happen. I mean, that's partly because clubs don't want to let players go unless they know they've got somebody else lined up to replace him. And these things generally take 2 or 3 weeks into the season, and as we've seen so often in the past, it's all left to the last day or two of the transfer window.
Yeah, we could do without it, couldn't we? But it always is.
Well, you know, and for that reason, I know that Tony Pulis does not want to go down that route. You know, we need players, and we've got a lot of games in January, and they're really important games as well. And he would rather see players come in as soon as possible. But of course, you know, if you want to get players now, then you're probably going to have to pay top dollar. There might be a bit of negotiation when it comes to the last day or two of the transfer window, but are you prepared to wait until the end of January? And that's always the risk.
Yeah, it's a huge risk.
Thank you very much for joining us, Jerry.
Pleasure.
Cheers, thank you. Hope to speak to you again soon.
Looking ahead to the window, Chris, because to me, our squad, I actually believe, is stronger than most people give off. What do you think our weakest position is? I think if you look at it, you've always got the left-back debate. Is Moxey and Parr good enough? I personally believe Dean Moxey's an outstanding left-back and can play regularly at this level. Tony Pulis obviously doesn't believe so. Do you agree with Tony, or are you on my side?
It's difficult, really. I kind of vary from week to week. I always, when I'm thinking about where our weak spot is, I suppose I always look at what do we talk about the most on our show. We talk about Dean Moxey at left back. We talk about the centre backs when they have bad games, obviously, and I think we have quite a lot of focus on the position that KG usually fills. Although the general belief is that we have people in the squad who can come into that position, and we don't really need to look there. But I'll go a little bit left field. First of all, I will say that Moxey has surprised me this year, and I'm perfectly happy relying on him as a left back. But I have a genuine belief that we will look to get someone in that position. And I think if you look at where, to be brutally honest, if you look at where a lot of the danger comes from, it is down that side when teams play against us. We look very solid through the middle, very organised through the middle. But the flanks, you know, Joel Ward, when he plays right back, has it sewn up. He's a superb player, and you know, in a way that probably doesn't help Moxey because he has to work really, really hard to give the equivalent performance, if you like. But you know, if I was actually to pick a weak spot, I do think we've been poor in terms of delivering crosses into the box, and that has to come from the wide players. And that's not saying the likes of Balassi, Punchin, Williams when he plays out there, Bannon when he plays out there, Jimmy Kebe even, who's not had much of a look in. But none of them, I would say, have regularly delivered good quality, because you see the times when they do, we're scoring goals. But yeah, that's So if my gut feeling is we need better quality from out wide.
A few people on the social networks saying maybe we could do with another centre half. I personally don't believe that Tony Pulis will want to be changing too much centrally, looking at the momentum that Delaney and Gabardon have created since Millen's taken over, and the solidity and the stillness. But they're older guys, but they're experienced heads. Maybe if we were to look to bring a younger centre half in that we can bed in later on towards the season and look towards the future.
It's a good shout. I'm going to turn it back on you. Do you rate Gabardon?
I don't believe his technical ability is as good as what we could have, but I believe his experience is far greater than anybody else's in the starting lineup. He is so vital, and sometimes he's vastly too calm on the ball, but at the same time that can be helpful a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, you basically touched on the points that I kind of struggle with. I didn't. It wasn't a loaded question. I wasn't going to say, well, I don't rate him, or well, I do rate him, depending on what you said. What I was getting at is, I think that if we're looking at the centre backs, I have a cause for concern with Gabardon for a couple of reasons. He kept fit for quite some time, but he's got a bad injury record over the last few years. Which, you know, for me, I'm always nervous when you've got a regular centre-back partnership. I'm nervous of it being broken, and I think it could be an enforced break at some point. I think, obviously, he lacks a little bit of height. Like you say, his experience counts for an awful lot, and his positioning is excellent at times. But for me, I've got a lot more confidence in Delaney, in the way Delaney defends, than I have Danny Gabardon. And And that's not to say I don't rate Gavin, because I think he's done a terrific job and they've got a great partnership. But I can see the sense in looking around and seeing if we can get someone new in, and for me it's someone with a bit of pace. We need, a big unit who's got some pace, and I think we're probably looking abroad for something like that. And
what about Mariappa though? Does he not have that?
Again, I would say the trouble is with Mariappa is that it's physical size, and I think Mariappa's probably one that he was the best available in the time frame that we had. And he's not by any stretch of the imagination a poor player, but if we're looking to go out there and get some people in positions that are going to make a real difference, then a solid pacey centre back, with a bit more height, a bit more aerial dominance, but it's not easy to find. But like I said, I think that's where we're looking. I think we're looking in France for someone like that. That's my gut feeling.
Obviously, this season we haven't created an awful lot of chances. That's been changing over weeks, but do you think that's down to our midfield, our tactics, our formation, or do you think that's actually down to strikers themselves that we have on the edge of the box not having a go enough?
There's a point to be made about the fact that we don't shoot enough. We're not terrible at that. We don't miss too many chances, and I think obviously Jerome's not clinical. That's there for us all to see, and if you look at his record over the last few years, he proves he's not a clinical player. So we're missing out there. But I don't know, chance creation I've never really thought is a huge problem. I just think we don't seem to notice when the chance is there. I think Bannon gives an awful lot in terms of creativity. But if you look at our midfield's based around being a solid unit in front of the defence. That's where our focus is, and rightly so. And we're relying on the two wide players and the guy just been in behind the striker and the striker to do all of that attacking work. So in that sense, we're never going to create huge numbers of chances unless we change the system. And the only way we can change that system is if we add quality in every position. There's probably a handful of players that you can say are sort of mid-table to upper table quality. The likes of Jednak and Ward. And perhaps an on-fire Johnny Williams, and then you start to if you're being completely brutally honest about it, we don't have the quality to start playing through midfield and all that sort of stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you don't think it's personally down to one person, but actually as a side, as a whole, that's down to us not creating enough.
Yeah, I mean, in your question, you mentioned, is it tactics? So I suppose the quick answer would have been, yeah, it's tactics.
Yeah.
We're set up that way. I don't know if you see it any differently yourself.
Not particularly, but I just think if we were playing like we were last season with a bit more expression, in Yannick Bolasie out wide, and obviously we don't have a Wilfried Zaha on the other side, and we don't have a Glenn Murray. But it's the way we've set up now, isn't it? We've set up to shut up shop early doors and make sure we don't lose. I think not losing is the priority, and that's just the way we're setting up, because we need to stay in this division, and unfortunately we're going to have to grind it out.
Yeah, well, exactly, and this transfer window is not going to be a chance for us to address that, and to get another 10, 11 players who are going to take us up to that next level.
Certainly not going to change overnight. We're joined on the phone by South London Press journalist Rich Cawley. Good evening, Rich.
Hi, how you doing? Okay?
Yeah, good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Just talk about the transfer window and Tony Pulis's view on things. What sort of player or what sort of position do you think he will be looking at himself?
Well, I think there's a few different areas that he's definitely going to be looking at that we can say pretty much without doubt that are areas that are going to be addressed. I think the centre of defence is obviously one issue. Paddy McCarthy, I think, will be, by the time the next 25-man squad's announced, I think obviously he won't be in it because he's still not really back or anywhere near to it, really. So I think in hindsight that was perhaps a spot that could have been used a hell of a lot better. And equally, the striking department's the other area as well. Kevin Phillips obviously going next month to get some football. And the indications are that Glenn Murray's not going to be fit until sort of February time now, not January. So, yet again, there's got to be a little bit of a question mark as to whether or not you include him in the 25-man squad. I mean, Palace might, but even if they do, I think they'll probably want to maybe give themselves another option there. So there are a couple of areas straight away that I think they'll be looking to address, and then you, I think, can throw in a few other positions as well. I mean, it's difficult to pinpoint exact other positions away from that, but I certainly think centre-back and striker are two key areas that they will look to do something in.
Being a Fulham fan, Rich, by day, you're down in the battle with us. What sort of money do you think Tony Pulis is going to get given, or what sort of money do you think he will need to keep us in this division?
That's a difficult one to answer. I mean, I think it is such a difficult position that a club finds themselves in. When you're kind of in the position that Palace are in, or even Fulham are in for that matter, you've got to be mindful of the fact that there could be relegation at the end of it. I mean, Palace have generally been pretty cautious with their spending so far. I think that's probably going to continue, but I do expect them to. I do think that they'll spend some serious money. I'm not quite sure how much that will break down as. I mean, certainly Peter Crouch and Matt Edmondson, who were mentioned elsewhere on the paper's website today. I've heard both their names mentioned to me. Obviously, Peter Crouch is going to come with pretty sizable wages if that was something that did actually happen. So I think they will try and push the boat as much as they can, but obviously being mindful of the fact that at the end of it all, if you do go down, it does put a little bit of a strain on things. So it's difficult to say exactly how much I think they'll spend, but I do think that you don't bring in someone like Ian Moody to sort of pinpoint signings without knowing that you're going to invest. You're going to try and have a bit more of a clearer plan, because I think the club will probably look back at the last transfer window and I think would admit themselves that after the leap from the playoffs, I think the transfer window at this level is so competitive. It's very, very difficult, isn't it, to necessarily always get the players exactly as you want them as well, because there is so much competition for their services.
Hey Rich, it's Chris here. I'll take your point on that. I mean, you mentioned Crouch and Everington as possibilities that have been rumoured that we've seen in the papers. Is there anything else sort of being whispered about that you've picked up on?
Well, I mean, not really. I'll tell you the reason why, because I think that Tony Pulis himself has kind of said that he'll talk about players once they're signed. I think he's kind of tried to keep the lid on things. The club themselves, particularly I think since promotion, have been a little bit quieter in terms of keeping the lid on things as well, which kind of makes sense, because if you're competing with 3 or 4 other clubs for certain players, I mean, you look at the groundwork that went in on Darren Bent, and at the very last minute he doesn't come. I mean, I think probably in hindsight you'd look at that and say that wasn't a disaster. But I think because of that, I think the club do try and keep a tighter lid on it. So the players that you kind of hear mentioned, quite often it's agent driven. Now, in those situations, that's both good and bad. You know, you get agents that are very straight shooters that will say, Palace are after our player, and they're telling the truth. Equally, of course, there are agents that will throw a team into the mix that aren't necessarily there. So it's so difficult. I'd imagine the list is really long, because if you look at probably the players that Palace would have initially earmarked when they got promoted compared with the players you got, I think there would have been a big old difference on that, because you can't have just a plan A. You've got to have a B, a C, a D and an E, because there is just so much. I mean, I still think, but what I'm hearing, that the Wilfried Zaha possibly is still a target. Now, the only thing that makes that a difficulty, I think, for the club is that they have got 2 loans already here, obviously with Punchin and with Jerome. There may be ways around that, I don't know, because my understanding is that Cameron Jerome's loan isn't one that Palace can necessarily break. So if Wilf does come back, it would have to be as a loan signing, obviously, and you quite wonder how that breaks down. But, I mean, they're the kind of names that have been mentioned. Edmondson and Crouch are 2 today that I'd heard mentioned before. Beyond that, it seems as though it's being kept fairly insular within the club, which is probably the right thing to do. You know, I think that obviously Ian Moody's compiling players that he knows. I mean, I spoke to Ian a little while back before the Cardiff game, and he was kind of talking about his knowledge, particularly of the French markets. I suppose that probably links through to a fair few players over there, that he was kind of saying socially and the kind of integration is a lot easier. So I wonder whether that's an area that the club will really look to try and explore and maybe get decent value for money.
No, it's interesting to hear you say that the sort of the approach the club are taking to transfer targets has changed quite so much, because obviously there's been a lot of changes. You mentioned Ian Moody there as something that's coming into the structure. I mean, is it it's noticeably different? I take it dealing with Palace now in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, I was talking to Steve Parish a little bit earlier today, and he wasn't really saying too much about particular targets they were looking at, but he was saying that obviously in the last transfer window it was all going through Steve. I mean, it's a really exhaustive process, isn't it? If you've just got the club promoted and you're kind of dealing with everything else that goes on around the club as well, such as getting the stadium ready for the Premier League, you're dealing with trying to get players in. It's a hell of a strain, and obviously now there is. I mean, I still get the impression. I don't think there's any doubt that Tony Pulis will have the final say. I think that Ian Moody's position is that he's kind of supplying a bit of expertise, a little bit of knowledge, and from there, of course, Tony Pulis will then make the decision. I'm sure it will still come down to what he feels is a good investment for Palace, but it has changed a bit. I think the club, since promotion, it's not quite as transparent in terms of what they're trying to do, and that's largely based on the fact that the competition is so big for any player. And I suppose if they start talking freely about it, then it alerts another club that they're close to getting things done.
Definitely.
Rich, from a neutral position now, not your Fulham hat on, do you think Palace have got what it takes to stay up?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I think if you look at Fulham and you look at Palace, I think that as a contrast, I don't think Fulham are necessarily equipped for what lies ahead. I think Martin Jol's, when he was the manager, moved away from the staple diet of what made Fulham successful, which was the sort of Roy Hodgson, very well-drilled players that played at a high tempo, that worked hard. Very much what Tony Pulis wants at Palace and what he's brought in at Palace, and maybe was there with a little bit with Keith Millen before that. I think when you look at it, I think Palace are absolutely equipped for it. I mean, the only blip really that there's been so far was the Newcastle home game since Tony's been at the club. I think that the players look like they've bought into it, working extremely hard. And I mean, I'll put in a match report for tomorrow's paper. If you'd said to Palace fans after the Fulham game, when I think there's 3 points on the board, you're kind of wondering what is the rest of the season going to hold in store. To now end the year being out of the relegation zone, albeit only on goal difference, but to be in that position, I think any fan would have taken that at the start of the season, to be in this position where, as well, going into the window, all of a sudden you're a club that I think people will look at, players will look at and think, this is a club I want to join. I mean, it wouldn't have been the same if you were 7-8 points adrift, but you're not. You're smack bang in it. You've got a manager, I think, that knows exactly how to get the best out of players. I'm pretty sure now he's got a very, very clear idea on who he thinks is with him long term, who he thinks isn't. And I think he's used the squad quite cannily. There was a lot of talk about certain players not really fitting the Tony Pulis mould of being these sort of big bruising players. But if you look at some of the lads that he's used, he's not necessarily gone down that route, has he? So I think you're in a really good place. And obviously the supporters, I mean, I know it's been said by the players a lot, and it sounds like a broken record, but the support, particularly away, but also at home, is, I think, just gives an extra edge, because I think in the Premier League, a lot of the atmosphere has gone out of it. You go to Man City, it's very, very quiet there. You go to Chelsea, it's definitely quiet there. These clubs, they kind of get used to being at that level, and they lose a little bit of the edge, a little bit of the atmosphere that can maybe turn and help you and help the players. And Palace have still got that. So I think they're firmly in good shape to stay up.
We're converting you. Thank you very much, Rich.
No problems.
Cheers. Thank you.
Looking back, Chris, on what Tony Pulis has done over the last 2 years in the transfer window, in the 2011-12 season he spent £21 million, and the 2012-13 he spent £17.5 million. there surely is no way in hell that we are thinking about any of those fees. He spent 10 million on Crouch, 8 million on Palacios. He bought in Upson and Woodgate, free transfers, but still you're looking at 30 grand each at that time, weekly wage. There's no way in hell that he's going to get that in Palace, surely, is there?
I was reading some quite interesting comments from Pulis today. I forget where, so I can't give him the proper credit. But he was talking about his record in the transfer market, and he was talking about two different ways of operating. And one was signing experienced players that their value is in keeping you in the Premier League, and the other was that in signing young players that he can improve and add value to. So, I mean, the second one of those is more what we're used to at Palace, and more what has worked for us in the past, in getting in good young players, developing them, and unfortunately having to sell them on at a later date. I don't think you've got to remember we all get very nervous when we talk about spending large sums of money, and obviously the club don't want to spend money unnecessarily, but it's worth pointing out where we are as a football club in terms of how financially well off we are. There are the parachute payments that give you a little bit of leeway. If you don't sign players on long-term deals, effectively they pay for themselves in the Premier League for that one season, and the parachute payments afterwards. You can take a calculated risk. So I don't want to sit here and say I don't think that Pulis can get large sums of money to spend. I think the bigger battle for him is in convincing people who are worth those sums of money that Palace is the right club to come to. We struggled with that pre-season, and in that first window, and that's ultimately what I think cost Ian Holloway his job, because he had to go out and get multiple players for smaller sums of money, which disrupted a lot of the the team spirit. I do want to quickly mention, I noticed a Facebook message come in from Paul Kensley, and he was talking about that loss of spirit and whether or not we'd be seeing that again. And I think that's kind of relevant to this discussion. I don't think Pulis is going to get 21 million quid to go and spend on 5 players, but by the same token, I don't think we're going to try and do things on the cheap.
Well, it was just a surprise to me that it was actually that much money. I always knew that he spent a lot, but never in sort of that calibre. You can't really look at trends too much, but looking at those two transfer windows, Tony Pulis bought 6 midfielders in just over 2 years.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's based on his team and what he had then, and that's different to what we've got now. But maybe that's somewhere he's actually looking to make stronger, because if you think about it, we've actually got a lot of midfielders and he's still choosing Joel Ward in a midfield position, whether that's because he believes he's a midfielder or he believes that actually I don't trust enough of these midfielders to play in that position where I think Joel can do.
It's a tough one. I think we both know that O'Keefe probably would have played there had he been fit. Whether that would be the case now after he's now seen Ward play in that position, I think you've got to be careful, because Pulis, as by his own admission, has not seen most of our fringe players in game situations. I don't think he would have known anything about O'Keefe really before he joined Palace, and he can't have failed to have been impressed with him. And obviously, it's unfortunate that Stuart got injured. And I think that he's probably looked at what Joel Ward's done at right back and thought he can transfer those skills into midfield. Probably knows a bit about Joel Ward in terms of the fact he's played all over the pitch for Portsmouth and all that sort of stuff, but. Realistically, I think the seasons you've picked out where he spent money, he'd been at Stoke for some time and knew what he wanted. I don't think you're going to get that level of certainty from him with the players he's got at Palace. I think it'll be probably 2 or 3 probably quite expensive signings. But as he said, I think we're looking at you mentioned the fact that there's high wages and high transfer fees there. I don't think we're going to avoid that. And Pulis is arguing, again, if you look at his transfer record, he doesn't bring an awful lot of money in. He brings some money in terms of resale value and stuff like that, but he's quite, he's one of those who sign inexperienced players, and his view is that you get your money back from staying in the Premier League. And I think that's the right approach to take, and I don't think it's that big a risk for us at this point in time.
We're going to get the opinion of Palace fan. We're joined by season ticket holder Craig Parkinson. Hello, mate. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good. In your opinion, Wilfried Zaha has been a player that's been tipped to come back to us, back to stardom at Palace. Firstly, would you have him back? And secondly, is Wilfried Zaha a player that would join us?
Well, you'd have him back in a heartbeat. He was by far and away our best player last year, and he made us tick. Would he come back is the big thing. The rumours are that he doesn't want to. Doesn't really want to fight a relegation battle. I don't know, but I wouldn't want to if I was him. He's left for pastures new. He will completely transform our season. He's one of those players, I think him and Balassi crossing the wings and swapping over the flanks. Well, they decimate a lot of the lower Premier League teams anyway, but I just can't see him coming back.
And looking upon this transfer window, is there any names in particular that you would like us to sign in any particular positions?
Well, it's the first time we've had a Premier League manager come in who's experienced and actually would know what to do, I think. It's completely different if Holloway was here. What would we do? I think, well, we'd probably be linked with every Stoke player known to man. Peter Crouch is rumoured, Matty Everington. With Ward playing so well defensive mid, is that a place we'd need to consider? Probably not. I'd say defence, but since Pulis has come in, he seems to have we've defended very well. Left back probably. And if Glenn Murray's not back in January, I suppose we have got to think about another striker. And I don't think our wing, bar Bannon and Balassi, I really don't think our wingers are up to much scratch. So I think probably another winger or two to see us through.
You alluded to Dean Moxey and Johnny Parr there, and a left back. Do you really think that Moxey's not good enough, or Parr's not good enough, or do you actually think Pulis is in the right?
I think Moxey's a good player. I think Parr's a better defender, but I like them both. I think Parr's played very well since he's come in. I've always liked Moxey. There are times when he drifts off, goes to sleep a little bit, but he was a lower league player, and he's really shot up the ranks probably quicker than he probably thought. So I think giving him a season in the Prem, he'll be much better than what he was. Parr I really like, but then Pulis is his own man, isn't he? He'll want to bring in players that he knows and trusts. But I think with the defence the way they're playing, I don't see why we would change it. But I can understand, obviously, we need replacements, because I don't think that anyone on our bench is probably good enough to replace.
Hi, Craig. It's Chris speaking. Hi, Chris. You mentioned Peter Crouch in there, and obviously he's one we've been linked with pretty much, across the board since Pulis came in. Yeah. I've been obviously reading the message boards and things like that and looking on Twitter, but it's a sort of a mixed opinion on Peter Crouch, which I find quite weird in a lot of ways. What's your opinion on would you be happy to see him sign for us?
Well, I think you would do. He's a Pulis type player, and with the way we're playing at the moment with one target man up front and sort of player just behind him, he'd fit into that system quite well. He holds the ball up very well. I don't know whether or not he'd score the amount of goals that he used to, but to be honest, he's got his experience in the Premier League. You can't say fairer than that. The only thing obviously concerned is that he's obviously going to be on a massive wage, and it's not something I would like us to go back to him paying very high wages. But I can't see. I think I wouldn't be opposed to signing him. I think he's obviously got no pace. Cameron Jerome has done really well, I think, since he's come in, and he runs the line really well, quick. He can hold the ball up. Crouch will hold the ball up. He'll probably get you a few more headed goals maybe, but he's just got no pace about him. And as soon as the ball goes up, you're not going to get, I don't think, much of a work rate from him, but I could be wrong.
That's a very interesting point. That's something we've talked about, that you do lose Jerome's pace. Although Jerome, like you said, don't really carry a huge goal threat. No, it's a very, very interesting point. Just sort of take you away from looking at people coming in. If you had to pick a player or a number of players to sort of get rid of, who would you pick?
Christ, there's a whole load of them. Just before I come on, I was looking at our squad. Right, who would I get rid of? Well, they've got. To be honest, there's probably quite a few players that came in over the summer that you would say, actually, do we actually need them? Grandin, there's no point in him being here. He might as well go.
Yeah.
people obviously, I mean, since that Fulham game, Campagna really hasn't had a look in. Would he? I wouldn't want to sell him because there's obviously something about him that he's very good at. But maybe he might go out on loan.
Yeah, good shot.
Same with O'Keefe. I mean, I'd love O'Keefe to start. I think whenever I've seen O'Keefe play, I think he's done fantastic. I really rate him, but he just never starts. So there's got to be a reason behind that. Who else? Jack Hunt, I suppose he's injured, so he's not going to go anywhere. No one's going to sign him. I think we'll probably get rid of one of our keepers, be it Alexander or Price, which is, well, hopefully Alexander. I've not really seen much of him. I've always rated Price. I think he's done very well. Phillips is virtually gone, isn't he? He said he's going in January. I can't see Garvin staying. Dobby, he's off. I mean, we've still got Wilbraham on the books. I don't know why. So he's probably a Pulis player, so we'll probably keep hold of him.
It's an interesting point that obviously people like Wilbraham, they can play in the month of January, those outside the 25. So maybe like you say, Pulis will give Aaron Wilbraham a go.
Yeah. I don't know, there's a lot of players on there that will never play for Palace again. I mean, Darcy Blake, he probably will never play for Palace, so you might as well get rid of him. I mean, I love Rambo. I think he was one of my favourite players last year. I'd like him back in the squad. I mean, he's meant to be, I mean, they're meant to all love him there, but is he good enough? He's probably good enough for a squad place, but he won't get in the starting 11, will he?
No, that's right. I think, obviously, I don't think we can recall him from Barnsley anyway. I did ask him not too long ago. He said he's there for the season, which is, so kind of rules that one out, but I'd agree with most of those.
Players.
Yeah.
And Craig, can we stay in the division?
Oh, absolutely. The way we've been playing at the moment, I don't see why not. This is our best chance we've had in a long time. I mean, not many people would have said after Man City we'd be basically going into New Year that we'd be outside the bottom three after the start we had. So you can only think that's a positive and move on.
Thank you very much.
That'd be a big help.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us, Craig.
No problems. Take
Cheers,
care.
thank you.
Bye. Just going on to the actual window now itself. For you, Chris, for me personally, I'd obviously love us to bring in Zaha, and I really wouldn't want somebody like Crouch just based on wage and everything that I think Crystal Palace is about, and about youth and young players expressing themselves. And maybe that's not right for a Premier League, but I think we just have to carry on that ethos. Are there any particular players that stand out for you? Maybe a Jordan Rhodes type player. Scott Dan, I know, was rumoured today, a centre half. Any players that stand out for you?
Yeah, I hadn't seen the Scott Dan rumours, but he's the type of player that I would be positive about us getting in. Jordan Rhodes, out-and-out goal scorer, but in terms of build and the way he operates, if we're going to spend £6 million on Dwight Gale, it just seems odd to then go, unless we do a bit of a swap there, let Gale go to them on loan and get Jordan Rhodes in. But money, he's on 40 grand a week at Blackburn. He's going up a division, he'll want more money, and transfer fee's going to be huge. I think we missed our opportunity for him some time ago, through the fact that we didn't really have the money to go and get him for the £1 million that we were quoted. I don't know, it's a really tough one, mate. I've been looking around at what sort of players that we've been looking at, trying to pick up on a few of the usual in the nose on the forums, and one of the guys on the BBS Clapham Grand, that's Chris Waters. He's usually a reliable chap. And he revealed today that he's heard we've been scouting Connor Wickham.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, and he is the sort of player that I can see being a success at Palace. He's really, really struggled as a Sunderland player.
Hasn't really got that chance, has he? That maybe a side like we would give him.
But I mean, they offered stupid money for him that the Ipswich couldn't turn down, and he did the usual thing, saw the bright lights of the Premier League, thought got to get in there as quickly as possible, and it doesn't always work for you when you do that. You sometimes you've got to just give it that extra season. Like I say, Ipswich thought, we'll take the money now for the player that he is, and it was big money. I think it was 7 million plus add-ons and all that sort of stuff, and he's looking a lot more like his old self at Sheffield Wednesday. Starting to get a few goals there, and is leading the line well. If he impresses, I think he could do a really good job, and I think that sort of a signing inspires people much more than a Peter Crouch type signing, because he's got a future as well as something to offer now. But I don't know. I go back to what we were trying to do in that window. We were trying to get Bentner in. Now I'm not saying we go back in for Bentner, although I do think he'd have done all right with us. But I think we do. I'm going to end up talking like Gel because this is where I really do agree with him. Where he goes on these little rants about strikers. I think you talk about you pay money and you pay wages for strikers. They're the biggest earning players and the hardest people to get. People who put the ball in the net, and that for me, that's what's going to keep us up. We're not going to score loads of goals and there's not going to be loads of chances, but when we get chances, we've got to put them in. And if you're being critical when you look at the way we played against City, you look how long it took to get that goal against Villa, you look at various other games this season where we think, we've done really, really well. And you and me were talking about it in the last show where how often can you say you've done well, but if only we converted that chance. So for me, we've got to look at a striker. And well, I'm inspired to a point about someone like Connor Wickham. I want someone proven, and that is the hard one. And the only one that we've been linked with that I think comes in that category is as Gomes or Gomi. I don't know how you pronounce it. Over there, he's playing for Lyon, isn't he?
Yeah, he's over at Lyon.
There's talk of him being targeted by Spurs and West Ham as well, but that's exactly the sort of player I'm talking about. Someone with a bit of pedigree, played for France at international level, got goals, good leads the line well, just got class about him. And okay, I haven't seen a huge amount of him, and not many of our fans would have done, but you've got to be half decent to play for France. And when I have seen him, he's looked like an absolute beast, and that's what I'd like. That's the sort of player I want.
He's always comes so close to joining the Premier League. And I mean, Arsenal and Spurs, he's been tipped with the Newcastle.
Yeah.
I wonder why that's actually never flourished and happened. But that would really set out, wouldn't it, and say, you know what, we're giving this a real go, and really put people around us shaking in their boots. West Ham were going, right, we can't sign a striker. We can't get one for God. And then Palace go and sign Gomes, and then they'll be absolutely shaking, I tell you. Overall, I think Tony Pulis is going to go and sign 3 players, because I don't think he wants to change too much, because he knows we did that in the summer and nearly had us relegated before Christmas. And I don't think he wants to hit that spirit, and I think he's aware of that, and I don't think he wants to disturb things. How many players do you think he's actually gonna sign? Because there's some people saying he's going to go out and do a lot, some people say he's not going to do anything at all. They're keeping things so close to their chest, we can't really be too sure, but from your opinion, what do you think?
I think is entirely dependent on who we move out, and I don't think it's got anything really to do with the finances of moving players out. It's all to do with space in the squad and not having people there, not playing games, because that creates a bad atmosphere. It creates tension at the club, and that's the other side of things that we have to look after. I think we can sensibly move out. I mean, we were talking earlier. It looks like Kwesi Appiah's probably on the way out from his tweet earlier on today, where he just mentioned that exciting week ahead and decisions to be made. Done really well at Cambridge. Maybe he's off back there. Maybe he's going to go somewhere, somewhere a little bit higher up, because he's been excellent. So, that's the sort of player that will be moving out, and you've got to think there'll be people after Garvin. You've got to think people might even come in for Wilbraham. We'll probably release a few. If we can free up enough space, I think Pulis will go after whoever he can get. It could be 1, it could be 2, it could be as many as 5 or 6. I really do think that.
And will that be enough to keep us in this division?
That's the question, anyway. I mean, what do you think? What do you think? I mean, I think that the trouble is, it's all about momentum, isn't it? And we've got a bit of that at the moment. But a run of poor results could only be around the corner. I don't want to be pessimistic about it, but that's what could happen. And sometimes it's hard to get back into a winning habit. We've not won a huge amount of games, but we're winning sort of. Every now and then. It's good to keep that going and to keep the performance level up. But it makes things. Whoever you bring in, if all of a sudden the confidence goes, it doesn't matter how good people are really. Because if the confidence isn't there and they're not playing as a unit, not playing as a team, then you're in real trouble. But I think all the signs are positive that Tony Pulis isn't the kind of manager who's going to let that happen, and he knows what he wants. So I think three quality signings, I think the minimum is what we need. Possibly you could argue, if you want to be simplistic about it, 1 in each area of the pitch, 1 at the back somewhere, maybe even a keeper. That's a point of debate that we keep getting to. 1 in midfield and 1 up top. And just quality. That's what we're talking about now. We don't want to go and look at the Championship for potential. That's not really what we're about right now. We've done that. We've got plenty of lads in our squad that got a bit of potential. And who's to say one of our lads from the academy might not step up and suddenly be the difference. Kai is getting a load of goals, absolutely lethal from a free kick. He can force his way into that squad, might get a little opportunity. Who knows? Might not be talking about a transfer window anymore. We might have the answer right here.
In a nutshell, we're staying up then, yeah?
Yeah. Why not?
I like your positivity, Chris. There we are. The window opens just a couple of days, and Palace expected to be busy early on. For certain, it'll be very interesting to see who comes in and who goes out. 25-man squad selection will not be easy either. Make sure you tune into HOL Radio next Sunday, where we review Norwich and West Brom. For all the transfer gossip and speculation, visit homesdale.net. Thank you to Chris and everyone else who joined me. Goodbye.
Bye.